So I'm having my morning cup of coffee. This is Betty. I'm getting myself together for the day. And I'm thinking, this whole business of hidden figures in African American history really upset me. Now I know none of us can know everything. But there are some things, some people that we just should know, some incidents that we just should know, and not just African Americans should know it. Americans should know it. So the other day, as I do scanning the headlines, I read that we have lost another giant, I think, in the icons of African American history in this country, William T. Coleman Jr. He was a lifelong Republican, 96 years old when he passed. I think he had been married to the same woman for 70 years. He was a corporate lawyer, grew up in rough times, born in 1920. So you know what that must have been like. Born in 1920 and yet was able to go to Harvard Law and do some other things. But more than just being a corporate lawyer interested in making money, uh, William T. Coleman Jr. was a civil rights figure. He was iconic. He worked with Thurgood Marshall on the legal briefs that eventually became Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 that desegregated schools in America. Well, ostensibly, on paper it desegregated. It took a while longer to get that. He served in the Ford administration as the transportation secretary, and that's Gerald Ford. So he came in right after the Watergate Nixon debacle. He served on major corporate boards. He challenged the Reagan administration's efforts to allow federal tax exemptions for private schools that discriminated in their admissions. Bob Jones University, for example. And he championed the right of people who fell in love across the racial lines to be able to marry. And he did some of the legal footwork that led ultimately to the case of Loving versus Virginia, that it was the subject of a recent movie that ruled unconstitutional, that people couldn't get married because one was white and one was black or something else. This man went all the way to Supreme Court in his defense of, of what was right. And so when I think about William T. Coleman and I think about some of these contemporary black Republicans, and I say to myself, they always, or many of them, make the case that black people harass them, black people don't like them just because they are Republicans. That is not true. Black people don't like you because many of you are unprincipled black Republicans. You're in the party, but you challenge nothing. William T. Coleman was from that generation of Republicans who were loyal to his party. He was not a liberal. He was not a liberal, but he did know right from right and wrong was wrong. And so I asked myself, where are the black Republicans who are out there challenging some of the stuff that the Trump administration is coming up with? A ban on Muslims, trying to get Mexicans out of the country. How can you be black and be silent when other people are being discriminated against? So there's such a thing as being principled. I like the Latina Republican Ana Navarro just because she is a Republican and she believes a lot of stuff that I don't believe. But the one thing she does is she's not letting Trump off the hook. She's not putting party loyalty before making the difference between right is right and wrong is wrong. William T. Coleman was that kind of principled Republican. Brooks, the former senator from Massachusetts, was that kind of Republican. I grew up with Republicans, black and white, who were not of this ilk that they have today. I grew up in the Rockefellers, New York, and he didn't do everything that I liked, but he had some principles. He was about something. We now have a Republican Party that is closer to the old Dixiecrat Party. All of these kind of racist proposals and stuff, and everybody is being silent. And the black Republicans, I don't chide you for being Republican, but at least let your presence make a difference. You should know right from right and wrong from wrong. And you cannot just defend the indefensible and say, oh, black people don't like me because I'm a Republican. No, it's because you appear to be an unprincipled person. You will not speak up. You appear to be a Republican because it fits maybe your financial interests. but it does not fit the broader interests of the people from whom you sprang, the people who made you possible. So, I think about this thing, and I remember I'm old enough that I didn't grow up in the era of, Black History Month and African American History Month. I grew up when they had Negro History Week. Okay, it was a week. And in my schools in New York City, they told us about Booker T. Washington, up from slavery and work with your hands. And they told us about George Washington Carver, who was a great scientist down in Tuskegee and found all these uses for the peanuts. But it's interesting, they never told us about W.E.B. Du Bois. They never told us about Thurgood Marshall. These are people who were alive when I was in school. They never taught that. And so as I got older, I said, oh, this must be because there was the notion that we will talk in Negro History Week about the Negroes that we consider to be the good Negroes, the safe Negroes. But we're not going to teach these students about the Negroes who were in rebellion against injustice. You didn't have to agree with everything that they were about, but I should have learned about Du Bois before I was a grown woman. I should have learned about Thurgood Marshall in school when he was in fact working on the Supreme Court cases. So it wouldn't have been history for me, it would have been contemporary life because these people lived. So I just think about that. What I did learn about Black history, I learned from my mother, who went to segregated Robert Moton High School in Westminster, Maryland. Okay, Robert Moton was also a legendary figure in Black history, but my mother is the one who taught me about the poets, about Paul Laurence Dunbar. It was my mother who told me that every day in her school, they sang the national anthem, but they also sang Lift Every Voice and Sing, the national Black anthem that it's now become by the Johnson brothers. Okay, so lift every voice and sing. My mother taught me the words to that song. My mother told me about Phyllis Wheatley. My mother told me about the poets, the Black poets, the Black people. She put that into me because that was not being taught in my schools. And sadly, I'm not even sure that it's being taught today. I think in 2017, there were young African Americans who still have the notion that Black people never gave anything to the world. I can remember standing outside my high school waving a flag when John Glenn, the astronaut, went into space. But nobody ever mentioned the Black women who were the computers back at the space agency that made his flight possible until there was a young woman from Virginia, okay, who studied this, who learned about this, who knew these people through her father and wrote a book. And so we got the movie Hidden Figures. But the fact of the matter is that nobody really talked about that. And this was going on when I was a kid, when I was in school. So if I could wave a flag for John Glenn, why could I not know that maybe I could have grown up and be a scientist too? Had no role models. So, when I was looking at Mr. Coleman's obituary, what I kept thinking was, you can learn a lot from obituaries. They are mini history lessons. When you're young, you don't really think about that. You don't really read the obituaries. But the obituaries are the way we find out what happened before. Haven't you been to a funeral and read the obituary, even for somebody that wasn't necessarily famous, and go, wow, I didn't know that about Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so. I didn't know that she integrated that school. I didn't know that she was the first Black school crossing guard. Just information that you find in an obituary. I learned to appreciate obituaries on my first newspaper job in Mount Vernon, New York, back in 1980. And our staff was small and everybody had to write obituaries. When the call came in, nobody was too important to take an obituary. For a lot of people, that is the only time they're going to ever be in the newspaper or see their name in the newspaper. So we were taught to try to give great care to the information to make sure that it was correct, that the name was spelled correctly, because that is somebody's life pressed into a few paragraphs. So I would say to everybody, if there's some hidden figures, a lot of those hidden figures you can find out about by reading the obituary section of the newspaper. Now, increasingly, if you're not famous, you don't get an obituary. But we can all write the obituaries in our own family, for our own relatives. We all have hidden figures in our families that we don't know about, and nobody's going to teach the children unless we who are the elders teach them. So I just have on my mind today Hidden Figures and Obituaries. Please don't sleep the obituaries when you're checking out the rest of the news. As for Mr. Coleman, William T. Coleman Jr., I say rest in peace. You did well for yourself, you did well for your family, and you did well for your people. I'm just saying, make history in your own lifetime.